Shear the sheep. It's time for China spoilers. Hello and welcome to China Spoilers, a weekly podcast coming to you live from lovely 𝗣𝗚 Studios in Sichuan, Luzhou, Sichuan, China. We are a podcast about making an independent TV series or something while living in China. I am your host, Emily. With me as always is Peter.
With a new camera.
And today we're going to talk about characters, how to develop them, how to figure out if two characters are actually one character, or if one character is two characters, and all kinds of character stuff. But first, let's talk about how's your uncle. Okay, so first, a big basil plant update. Is that we ate it. We ate some of the basil, and it was really good. We actually ate it. We kind of promised we would eat it on camera, but
didn't make it.
It was so hot that I went out to hang laundry, and I smelled delicious basil. I was like, oh, that's good. But usually you can't smell herb plants out in the atmosphere. If you rub their leaf, you can smell your fingers and you could smell the smell, but this was an aroma permeating the air, and I realized the basil was cooking because it was 37 degrees Celsius, which is approaching 100 degrees, and it was our what is this called? Patio? Deck? No. Balcony has kind of a greenhouse effect because it's all glassed in, so it was definitely cooking the basil, so we had to eat it that night. But it seems like the plant survived. I moved it indoors, and it looks like it's growing new leaves, so it was very exciting. And as I said, we put it on a pizza. It was so good. I'm into fresh basil now. That's my thing.
Fresh pizza.
Fresh pizza, fresh basil. That's my thing. I got some super glue on my hands because I was gluing stuff earlier today, and I'm messy.
Gluing the what was it?
Our toothbrush holder.
One of the few holdouts all the way back from America.
Yeah, it was a wedding present.
Wedding present. Didn't last. Our cleaning crew.
Yeah, it was a clean break. The head of it snapped off in a way that was easy to glue back on. And it was from IKEA. It was a cheap.
Was it cheap?
I think it was cheap.
How dare you? You don't know who could be watching this.
So it was originally two pieces anyway, and fastened together, and then I just glued it, but then I got glue everywhere because the glue was runnier than I was expecting. I have a sneeze in me. Peter, how are you?
I'm pretty good. It's a little cold still. We got the summer cold. Summer cold.
I am over my cold largely, but because we had so much rain and now it is sunny, you allergy sufferers out there know that's prime pollen time. So I've been cold free but super sneezy for allergies, which is
great.
My life. That's the story of my life. Summer camp finished. That's a big weight off my shoulders. I got a summer vacation, which is the whole reason to be a teacher. Just kidding, you teachers out there, you do good work. But I like vacation. But something struck me it's an English language immersion program for our kids who are Chinese kids, so they speak Chinese. But one kid in particular is pretty good at English, and so he and I have discussions that, nearly fluent, I would say. Enough so, and we talk about stuff. With some of the kids, it is just they'll ask me in Chinese, can I play with the toys? And we'll be like, nope, let's say it in English. Can I go play with toys? But this kid and I, we have real conversations. And he's kind of a handful, so we have in-depth conversations about his feelings and what he should be doing when he is angry. And should it be hitting? No. But like, so there's like, we have logical exchanges, or he'll tell me about like things that he likes that are not in our classroom, and like, and so he started speaking in Chinese, and I was surprised that he could speak Chinese. It was a very interesting occurrence.
Yeah, you get used to speaking with people in Chinese, and that's totally your relationship with them.
Yeah.
Speaking with people, Chinese people in English.
Yeah.
As a teacher, and then they walk away, and you say their name like, "Hey, Jay," and they don't hear you.
Yeah.
And so it all of a sudden just it puts you off. Like, there's the break happens. Like, you're not the life.
Yeah.
You are the odd one that they're trying hard to do, and as soon as I would imagine it takes so much work to translate in your head that like it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially I think with older kids where they've tried on their English name as like a play language class thing, that like their name isn't Amy when they walk away from you. The little kids, I think, more do adopt it as part of their identity. Although I don't know if I saw like Stephanie out in the street and was like, Stephanie, if she'd respond.
How many kids do you have that just don't want to adopt a name? It's usually in the minority, right?
Yeah, especially with the younger kids, they're so excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 2 that were straight up like, just call me by my Chinese name, which I respect. Like, okay, I'm not supposed to speak Chinese, but I can't force you to be called something else. So we'll just, and like, usually if the situation calls for it, I'll call them by their family name. I'll call them like Miss Jung or Mr. Whatever, Mr. Wen. Sometimes I can't remember. Sometimes I can't remember their whole name. But so 2 kids opted not to, in my career of the last 4 years, teaching younger kids. In the 4 years of teaching younger kids, 2 of those chose not to have a Chinese name, and one of those 2 after a year was like, no, I'm ready for an English name. Sometimes they choose English names that are not really English names but sound close to their Chinese names. And I let anyone be called anything, even sometimes offensive things. I mean, oh no. I had a kid who called himself Shite. Not a baby kid though. That was the high school level. I would say the high school kids, again, were far more determined about, I don't have an English name. I don't need an English name. But the younger kids are like really into that.
Right. Well, the swears themselves they're not offensive because they're not.
Yeah, I mean, like when you learned language
there's plenty of people that have like T-shirts that have like fucking across it.
Yeah. When you learn language in high school, if you did, the way you treated that other language's curse words, that's the way they treat our curse words. So it's not shocking to them because I think swear words only have cultural force. There's nothing inherent to those collections of letters that are offensive. But like, we did have a couple kids call themselves Osama, I believe. But
favorite.
What you gonna do? I mean, you could get mad, I guess.
Well, the culture, swearing itself is like, because what you're hearing is movies and TV and stuff, and that's just normal flow of swear that we're all used to in rated R movies and regular TV now. So it's that's just, those are the cool words. So they're not even shockingly cool.
I mean, I guess if I had a kid that called himself Hitler, I might ask him to change his name. I don't know. There's this line with teenagers too of like, if I make a fuss out of something, that makes it more interesting, and if I downplay something, it just kind of fades out.
So you haven't had any Trumps yet?
No, because the babies don't know who he is,
okay.
And I'm not teaching older
Maybe in
kids.
high school,
Maybe in high school. The Turampu is what they call him.
Oh, what it means?
I mean, just Turampu.
Oh.
Trump in Chinese. Which I think is funny. It's much cuter than he deserves. But yeah, so that's language-wise what's happening. I'm trying to, now that I have more free time, I'm upping my game on the reading front in Chinese. I bought a newspaper, which turned out to be like a news digest, and then I couldn't read anything. It's tough. Like, my language is very specific, and most of it's geared towards restaurant ordering, but like daily life stuff, like I can name everything at the supermarket, but like a story about the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, I had to look up most of the words in that headline. And I was like, oh, okay. It makes sense. That's the word for moon and the word for month. Those are related. Which are related in English too, I think.
A lot of things are put together as digest, as regular handouts here. I mean, we notice it a lot from school.
Well, it cost 2 kwai, which was, it's the equivalent of 30 cents in America for like this like 8-page little.
But I imagine like the that kind of reading material to hand out in the public is a lot easier because there's a bigger research mechanism there that I mean,
it's like completely unbylined. I think it just is like pulls from the wires or whatever.
Right. It's not up to date news of like what's happening. Like,
well, it was up to date, but nothing like interesting.
Right.
Which is part of the problem too. Is like if you're trying to learn language and you're looking for supplementary materials, they should be stuff that you're interested in, or you're gonna give up on it. So I found this website, the Chairman's Bao, which a bao is a little bun, and it sounds like Chairman Mao. So that's the pun there. Yeah. But they have graded readers at different levels, and so that actually I'm having better luck with. And they pick out. This is a funny thing about teaching reading, because I've done this in the opposite for my intermediate students who are learning to read in English. The kinds of stories you pick, you don't want anything to be like too political or too technical or too in-depth detail of vocabulary you're not going to know. So so many of these language learner news stories are about zoo animal babies. I have assigned to my students a story about like pandas being born at the DC Zoo, and then I just read one about these lion cubs that were born at a zoo in Shanghai. But it is like zoo animals are a safe topic, I guess,
it's kind of like
for language learners.
Internet stuff. It's going to be cat news.
Yeah. Or what's the one I read this morning? I read one about a hospital ship. The world's biggest hospital ship. Oh, the one I read this morning was about the bottle cap challenge, which was not something I had heard of in the English language news I read. But then I asked Peter if he had heard of it, and he hadn't either. But then we looked it up, and like, oh, all the celebrities are doing a bottle cap challenge.
Yeah. We tend not to know what the celebrities are doing, unless they're on Colbert, and then we usually talk over.
But I guess that's the thing too, is celebrity news or harmless internet trends. That's the stuff of language learning news. Podcasts and reading. Yeah,
I don't know how much it's normal now, but it was at a time that Friends was the most popular way to learn English.
Oh, Friends, the TV show. Yeah, I think it still is quite popular. Although one of our actual friends said that they speak very fast. So she finds she had to like pause and like write down what she thought she heard and like go back and so it is a challenge. And I think, that's the reputation, is New Yorkers speak faster on the fast side of American dialect, so that as a show they spoke pretty quickly. But yeah, so that's my summer plan is to read a lot of Chinese.
You don't have any local Chinese Luzhou news?
No real Luzhou news. It's just been
hot.
Super hot. Cicadas are super loud. It's been like so hot people don't go outside. We're in that part of the
cicada sacrifice.
Yeah. Even the swimming pool, because the pool in our complex gets direct sun, so it's like taking a bath. Actually, it's so warm. But Chinese parents don't like their kids to be in the sun because they don't want them to get dark. So the kids aren't allowed to swim when the sun is out, which is like, that's the time you'd want to swim.
And our pool's slightly dependent on the time of day in the sun.
Yeah. Our pool gets pretty direct sun, I would say, in the afternoon, early afternoon.
And there's no one there.
Yeah. So maybe we'll go. But let's.
Because we need a tan. We're such bronzed.
I have skin cancer in my family. That's another thing. Regularly, people comment to both of us how white we are, which is like really uncomfortable. I don't really like getting complimented about how white I am.
I love it.
You do, because you're racist. The weird thing is that it happens in the gym locker room when we're all naked, too. Like, a woman touched me when we were both naked. Not in, like, any kind of...
Naked
but she,
way.
like... No kind of naked touching, but we were both naked and she touched my arm, which was weird. She's like, oh, you're so white.
Which is not like... We're not like in a particularly ethnic area where everyone looks dark to us.
Yeah, but I mean the social preference is for whiter skin in China in a way that is connected to racism, and people who have darker skin do get treated badly. And if you're actually a black person, we hear that that's a really rough situation.
Yeah.
So it's just, and I guess again, reminding us of our privileges. Like, the worst thing that happens to Peter and I is that we feel uncomfortable when it's pointed out how white we are. I don't know where I'm going with that, but that's just a weird part of our life here.
Yeah, spoiled foreigners, that's us.
That's us. But let's go on to business. Our big business is kind of a format change. So since about February, Peter and I have been kicking around an idea that has turned into a full-on miniseries. Ambition to produce a miniseries. Fiction script.
Not science fiction?
Not so far. No, we're not really science fiction. I love science fiction, but this piece is more absurd, magical realism. But yeah, so we want to hire actors. We want to, like, in the next couple years, work towards bringing this to some platform. Maybe Vimeo, where we charge per episode. Maybe Netflix will make a deal. We don't know. We have ambition, but we both grew up with an eye towards that indie spirit of the 90s, post Clerks. When did Clerks come out?
92 or...
I mean, not that
like
Clerks
that.
is the first
Yeah.
of that run of indie films, but that was like the big one.
That was your
where
high
it is
school,
like
my college.
an average guy picked up some cameras and got his friends to make a movie, and so that always
That actually
seemed...
got shown in a theater somewhere.
Yeah, that always seemed like something that would be possible to us, and you and I over the years have had our different projects that we worked on in that vein, and so now this is the big one. And so we kind of wanted to, because we found the past couple of weeks we were struggling for things, artistic things to talk about that met the purview of, like, making short films in China, because we were keeping it secret that we were working on this miniseries. But then, so we didn't have anything else to talk about, because that was what work was being done. So then we decided this week that, hey, let's talk about it. You can follow along with us as we go through the process of, I mean, we're still in early development, but hopefully through development and pre-production and production and post-production and distribution, which, you know, for scale, this may take years. It's already
has taken years, actually.
Yeah.
We're in the pre-production part, that's where we're beginning, and that's what YouTube is a beginning.
Yeah.
But also we've been doing it since we got here, we just didn't know it.
Yeah.
Starting a blog,
Yeah.
writing, taking pictures, and then, I mean, in today's society, we just, you can't tell a story with a little magazine article on the internet, so it turns into video, and then the story that we just realized that anyone that wants to hear the story at all wants to hear the story of how we moved and what we do when we get it over here.
Yeah.
And so it's not a biopic, but...
Right, well, let's talk about particulars later.
Yeah.
Just the business is, this podcast is going to take you along on our journey as we hopefully pursue this project. And the YouTube channel is still going to go as it's been going forward these past couple months, which is semi-erratically with lots of changes. But I think YouTube has been for us a way to kind of test out our chops and test out new ideas, both technologically with what kind of equipment we're using, and then also like what kind of writing ideas we want to try out. So it's still, that's still going to be active. But
at this point more so than ever before.
Yeah,
we're like posting every day.
Yeah. Well, with the spoiled foreigners coming to you every day. But yeah, so YouTube for us was never the end goal, and now we're sharing with you what our actual end goal is.
Yeah, the best description that we have so far is that it's a sketchbook.
Yeah.
YouTube is us
YouTube
sketching
is
out
our
ideas.
sketchbook. And we hope you continue to enjoy that, and I hope, you're interested if you yourself are pursuing creative projects, if you have always wanted to know how an indie piece comes together.
Because we'd like to know.
Yeah. Because, if people in the 90s, when pre-digital, or like while digital was being developed, it still was a significant amount of money to get these films made. And they did them.
That was the big deal with it, was that the big story was always, and not just with movies, but like albums that were, again, digital just broke everything through because you didn't actually have to pay by the inch of the tape that you were using.
Film, if you're on film, it would even as smallest micro-budget indie, I think would still cost at least $1 million.
So being able to
now
do
that
it by
we have
yourself.
the technology where it doesn't have to cost that much money. So we should be having even more indie. Let's start the indie renaissance.
Well, it is, but it's strangely has gone right to reality TV version of, which is what YouTube is filled with. So
Yeah. Well, that's
because
we've got a distribution problem.
And we also have a writing problem too.
Well, yeah, but like in terms of you and I, we can create this content. The problem for us is, as we face it, is how do we get people to watch it? But we'll continue to work on that while we work on the most important thing, which is the content.
I think that's the fun part about doing YouTube in this way, is that it's not just an experiment of like, let's figure out how do we use cameras, let's figure out how do we work on writing characters, let's figure out how do we work on sound and distribution and hiring actors, and the whole thing is just like, it's possible, I think. Let's just see what we find out as we go along.
Yeah.
That's the sketchbook side of it.
Yeah.
We'll see what we figure out.
Yeah. So let's get into it with a little homeschool film school. So a good story starts with character, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about what our mini-series is actually about. So in February, Peter and I took a YouTube hiatus to kind of take stock of what we were doing and where creatively we wanted to go. And we, at the time, had been experimenting with short fiction pieces that Peter and I would act out. And so we were like, well, let's expand on that. And so we started developing ideas for that. And then I wrote a couple drafts of scripts, outlines, with the idea that Peter and I would perform them.
To our best of abilities.
Yeah. And then, working through that, we decided, what if we got actors to do it, and then we could tell big stories like these, because it helped that we had. That's when we wrote the little vignettes of I bought new shoes, or I went to the pharmacy, or whatever. So we were thinking of expanding those, and then we made those, and then we were like, well, we don't know that we'll ever get, Peter and I as actors will ever get good at that. What if this was a real deal production and we hired actors? And so it turned into a half-hour miniseries. And of course we started with our life, and so it was about two expats in China making YouTube videos. But that didn't go anywhere, and it turned into the story. I was trying to avoid it because it feels cliche, although looking at the media landscape, there are no stories about expat teachers abroad. So it's not a media cliche. It is a life cliche of like, if you're in this world, like the Chinese expat teacher is a character, and we hate them for no good reason anymore. I don't think it used to be a disreputable job, but now it is like.
Yeah, which
now
throws up its own dust bowl.
You have to have a master's degree to be a teacher in China. Yeah. So, but anyway, that aside,
there's a whole weird world that we didn't really know anything about until we stepped into, and then we went. There's a whole lot of people that have a whole scene.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's been a few things. There's a few books out there. There's a few comic books. There's a few movies, but
yeah. So we started from this place of autobiography, and then like took it more and more into the fictional. And part of the decision to take it away from Peter and I, even the characters were called Peter and Emily, and we have since changed their names.
Which is funny because we were uncomfortable with referring to ourselves in the third person.
Yeah.
That just made it extra weird.
Yeah. So then, maybe next time we'll talk about the plot aspect of it. But we wanted to start with characters because every story we like has good characters, and from writing. If you have good characters, it's almost a cheat of like they tell you what they're gonna do, which I say is a cheat, but it's not easy. So we changed these characters into just they're American expats living in China, but they are no longer us, and so
possibly American. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean they're based on us. They're probably gonna be American.
That's the fun part is that as we come up with the ideas, we do tend to change them. As need be.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and the characters, like you're saying, write themselves. Like, sometimes you're trying to write them one way, and then one day you wake up and they're like, nope, we're going to be this.
Yeah.
That's already happened a couple times.
And I would say the character development is... So, late February, we had this idea. We solidified, like, what we're working on is a fictional miniseries that we intend to produce with other actors filling these roles. And I wrote a few drafts, and I wrote a few passes at a character bio sheet that, maybe this is not how everybody does it, but this is how I did it and experienced at writing this type of thing. I had to write through a couple drafts to figure out who our characters were. And because it was, like, because we'd have the idea of, like, so-and-so is adventurous but shy. But, like, it's okay, so what does that mean in the sense of what she does and the kinds of reactions she has to the events that happen to her and what are the events that happen to her. And so I kind of had to run them through kind of like trial events to see how I would want them to react. And so that made it really much, I had to like write them things that are ultimately not going to end up in any draft, in any final product, but I just had to like write these stories using them to find out who they are, which was kind of arduous, but it was fun too. And then, so once I got a good sense of like whose story we wanted to tell, I did look up, in addition to story structure, there's a lot of rules about character types. And formulas have maybe ruined Hollywood, and that's, you know, that's why movies are boring these days. But it also is like, these are elements of storytelling that have been true since the beginning of stories. And so so this was one of the things that I found helpful as a guide, is that there are kind of 6 different characters that you'll want to have in any TV show specifically, but a movie too. Movie might have fewer because a movie is more focused. But so yeah, you have your protagonist, who's your hero, your antagonist, who's kind of puts the plot in motion of their enemy. You have a helper, who is maybe like the buddy, the best friend, and a mentor who can be the helper, who can be like the wise boss, the wise compassionate boss who like gives you a lift in your time of need. You have a nemesis, Now, I should have brushed up on this before, because the nemesis, I think, can be different from the antagonist. The nemesis might be like some kind of comic relief. But anyway, so there's all these character types. So once I had an idea of like who I wanted to have in this world, I kind of refined. So I found personalities, and then I found what their role was. I put these personalities into roles. And then that's where we came onto the whiteboard. I wrote everyone down and put all their relationships, and found I had like 30 people for a 6-episode miniseries. It might have been 8 episodes at that time, but it was 30 people, even incidental characters. That's too many. So then I went through kind of and like looking at not just their personality, but what their role in the story was. And I found many that overlapped. And so because this is based on real life, these are kind of like based on our friends. Although, if this makes it to a finished product and you watch this,
don't go looking for yourself.
Don't go looking for yourself, because it's even by this point it's already amalgamated into.
We're also like trying to, if any part of it is the biographical, it's that we're trying to tell the story of us being in this city. So we want to use as much of the city as possible. So you start like tagging characters of this is that kind of person, and then you start to realize that like, that's just too many. I can't tell the story of 2 million people. Yeah.
And so like I had this was the guy he's another long-term expat who's a good friend to our main characters, and then this is a guy who's a long-term expat who's also a good friend and plays sports. Well, I think they're one character now, and so the one character has a family in Luzhou and plays sports. And
I must imagine that, like, for most writers, that you're pulling from people that you know, and then when your friends and other colleagues and family are like, hey, what, is that me? And you're kind of like, you always hear like a writer saying like, well, I mean, yeah, you're in there.
Yeah, I stole details of your life. But I think what
but it doesn't have to be
the stuff that I'm drawing on is more like details, I think, and the actions that they will take in our story are stuff that I made up.
Well, that's the steering things into to making the story move forward, and rather than just people sitting around like, hey, you want to go to Hot Pot again?
Right. Although we've seen situations unfold that we've been holding on to for years that are so good that what we were holding on to them for is probably going to make it into. Like we had a friend whose mom sent her a package from across the world, and it was like just a bunch of junk. And so she opened it up and she's like, this is a half-used chapstick. Why did my mom send this to me? And that's in a draft already. But so there is, I would say.
Hi, Tara.
Yeah. We're not trying to like import our people we know wholesale into the script, but all of that is material and clay to be shaped into what we want to do, and
as a side,
and who we want to see in our story.
That's always an interesting thing that people have. I imagine it has more to do with personal relationships with the writer and people that you know, that some people will tell you as you're writing, make sure you put me in the story. While other people are like, if I see one thing, I'll sue your butt right off.
But so that's the process of kind of. Then I condensed all these characters into, because I was writing, I was still writing drafts with these characters, and then like, the audience is going to remember who this guy is because we've met like 15 people. We met 15 people since then, and he was only in episode 1, and now it's episode 6. Like, does he have to be in this again? And if I need 8 people to be at this dinner party, maybe they should be people we already all know as the audience. And so that like very much helped narrow down, like, there's a reason. And we were watching the first season of The Office at the time, which helped me in terms of characters. That first season, that first 6 episode is really just about Jim and Pam and Michael and Dwight. The other characters are all there, but they don't get fleshed out really big until season 2. And so it kind of helped me to see the scale of like, if you're telling a tight 6-episode story, you do need to focus it in on a small amount of characters. And the world can be populated, but those characters have to be there for a purpose. They can't just be like flavor.
Yeah, well, it's funny because as you like color, to take an illustrative example, as you start to color the background, there's less dark lines in the characters that you're making. There's less colors, then they become.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even your main colors are like your Scooby-Doo. Like, make sure you put Pam and Dwight in the same color clothes every time.
Yeah.
Because until people get used to them, you don't put them in a sweater or something.
Right,
That's your variant figure.
Yeah.
But as you start to get back to the point where like you actually are like, you could have a crowd. You could have who knows who, if anybody in the Mary Tyler Moore opening as she's walking down the street, are any of those people still alive? Like.
Yeah.
That just a crowd of people just kind of becomes a mush. Mm-hmm. But as you try to figure out like which ones, you're like, well, here's 100 people, and I only want to tell the story about these 2.
Yeah.
Trying to, I think, separate those, or it's difficult to decide like.
Yeah.
How many get to see the light of day?
Yeah. And then the challenging part is, so you've got your characters, you figured out their motivations, you figured out kind of how they'll react in any given situation. And then you have to convey that if you're writing a novel, you can like write all kinds of stuff about their interiority, you can describe them externally, but if you're writing a script, all you've got is the visual of what they look like and what they wear and their body language, that's a lot. That's not all just, but it still is like, it's a different way. And then what they say in dialogue. You don't get access to their thoughts because that's just not how TV works.
That's a big thing from comic books when people were saying like the bright colored costumes are not going to work on the screen. So that's, I mean, the effects aside, billions of dollars in effects of today, but another thing was in comic books you always would read like meanwhile, and then Spider-Man would be thinking like, boy, I hope Aunt because he's got no one to talk to because he's flipping from building to building. So like Superman has got no one to talk to in the sky, so you've got to hear his thoughts. But he can talk to
himself.
Right. So that's not going to transfer
that
to a
becomes
screen
ridiculous
at all.
Yeah.
And you have the same thing in books too. Like you can actually get into the characters' heads. But on screen it seems like you're crazy or it's a gimmick.
Yeah. But that actually turned out to be helpful, I think, because the draft I wrote where we had discovered and condensed our main cast down to, we have got 6 and then another however many that is.
Not real names.
Well, there was real character
real
names.
names.
Those are the character names.
No, I mean real names of people that we know.
Oh no. I did start with names of people we knew, and then I was like, I can't do that. I have to change them. And then I realized, without intending to, I had named our nemesis character really the name of someone I don't like. And so I was like, oh, I have to change that. It all has to be conveyed through dialogue. So when I had these characters, I wrote a draft where a lot of it was information. It was a lot of bad exposition through the mouths of the characters and almost interchangeable of how they would, like, any character could say any line, which is like, that's a bad script. So it helped me to refine even further who I thought these characters were by, like, being more specific about, like, well, this character wouldn't say anything like that. And that, like, we just read a pilot draft, second or third draft now, that turned out to be, it's probably 2 episodes, not 1 episode. But I was really proud, if I could pat myself on the back, like, each character in the pilot now, if they say a thing, that's only a thing they would say. It's not a thing someone else would say. And that really helps me clarify. Maybe I wasn't a good writer before. It helped me clarify, like, who these people were. That, like, oh, only this guy can say this. And if this happened, this person would react this way, and this person's going to react this way, and that's how that scene's going to move forward. But I think it was necessary for me anyway, as a beginner at all this. I had to write through having a million characters, and I had to write a draft where they all sounded the same, and I had to write a draft where all of their dialogue was expository, saying what's happening in the scene, and then take that and make them real people in these situations. Which, yeah, I don't know. That's what I did.
You've talked about a lot of what you're learning is, as a writer, on paper, with words, what somebody, because I'm not, but I'm a visual person, of what I can tell about the story that you maybe need to put on paper, but that's for me, and that's...
That's that too, in terms of... I was very caught up in, like, what are they thinking? And when I would read you drafts, you'd be like, where are they in the room? Where are they in relation to each other? Is there movement? And, like, that was another layer of helping me actually visualize. Because when I read, I don't actually visualize. I don't know if that, I mean, I know for a fact that's not how everybody reads, but I think that's part of why I can read so fast, is I'm not making visualizations of what I'm reading.
And I tend to read really slow because I'm usually stopped on a page of, like, so-and-so enters the room, and I'm like, okay, where's the door?
Yeah. No, to me, a book is purely linguistic. I don't see any pictures while I'm reading it. Which I think is why, when I started reading comic books, I didn't really get it. Because I was like, well, done.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, like, I appreciate art. I love visual arts. I love looking at paintings and
well, I think that's
images, but
most comic book readers are aware of that you started reading comic books, and it's something that you've done your whole life, so that somebody who didn't, they sit down and read a comic book and they're just following from panel to panel, from word balloon to word balloon is really tough. But like when you start to more sophisticated ways of telling sequential story art, of moving from page to page.
Well, you had to explain to me, Chris Ware, is that who it was? Part of, like, he just drew a big circle, and who cares about Jimmy Corrigan? He's always sad.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, but look at how it's all presented on the page. Part of his visual genius is not just like that he drew this bobblehead guy, but that how the page flows is actually part of what he's doing.
And you could blow that up into a poster, put it on your wall, and like look at it for years and be like, I never noticed that.
And even being fairly fluent in like visual art history, you still had to like show me how to parse that. So that's, but again, a challenge that made it better was then like going through these situations and visualize them playing out. And then that led to an opportunity for adding so much more background into our story, but maybe background's another topic. Because that's chock full. Yeah, because once you start to visualize, then you put them in a place, and then the place becomes very exciting. And then they have more to react to, and then that gives you more insight into who they are.
Right, for character itself, of like what are they doing in a room. Like we talk a lot about like you've made a character. Even when we were doing our little exercises of us trying things together, I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing while I'm talking to you? I can't just like look at you in the face and say these words that you want me to. Like, I need something. Give me some juice or something. Like, and you see actors talk about that a lot of like, you know, what's my motivation? It doesn't necessarily have to be like this deep inner motivation. Like my motivation is like, I really need to open this juice, and I
right.
So that's a whole nother story. If you
or what am I doing with myself? Who is it? Brad Pitt is always going to eat.
Always eating, yeah. Yeah. If the story, if there's a whole other story. If I'm having a conversation with you, in the meantime while we're talking, I'm doing this, and you're like, as a viewer, you're like, are you nervous? Like, are you that weak? Can you not?
And then,
get
like, as your
cues?
scene
like,
partner, I can like kind of react to like, are you listening to me?
Yeah.
Like and that's again
subtext of character movement.
In terms of using the video format to its fullest, of like, I enjoy good wordplay. I love reading. I love words. But if you're only putting words on the screen, then you're missing out on maybe more than half. I think visuals are probably more than half of
Well,
what's happening when you're watching.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like audio too. Like if you can't understand what somebody's saying,
Yeah.
or if the music's too loud, or so much of that is rather than just the words. I mean, I think that's when you get to, I don't know, like let's take something like My Dinner with Andre with. Let's take out. I mean, they're not like in a city scene. There's not in a country. They're in a booth the entire time at dinner talking. So that means every little gesture that they move, every fork that they move, every waiter that comes over, and that becomes like a whole plot point. I mean, that's probably why a lot of people find that kind of stuff boring. But like, you have to have the words and the actions doing things at the same time.
But that's not an accident. Like, to come back to Kevin Smith and Clerks, it's kind of his flaw, and it took off because it also was like a normal guy. We hadn't seen that in a while, but it's also his flaw that it's every scene is just really two characters talking, and the way that he writes is all interiority being verbalized. There is no like subtext, there's no action behind, there's no people holding feelings back and like giving any kind of irony. He wants the characters to riff on Star Wars, so they riff on Star Wars, which in Clerks it works so well because that's what being a clerk feels like. But that with My Dinner with Andre, I don't think that's the same thing. I think that's a specific choice to excise all other visuals so that you are like Wallace Shawn's face at any given moment is telling you volumes, or like fiddling with a napkin, or the waiter bringing whatever.
Whereas in like something with Clerks, it's a lot easier for like a guy comes in and is like, why is there a cat on the desk? Like, why there's a cat shitting on the desk? Like, you can go right into poop humor.
Right.
That's your
Whereas
distraction.
like when I bring there's no cat shitting so far in our script, but when I bring a similar thing to you, and I say the line, and then you say, but we can see the cat and what it's doing already. We don't. That's redundant to have a character comment on it. What if they say something different? And so
well, that's like it's a weird part of like there's one thing of exposition of like saying, I'm going to give you the whole backstory because I can't afford to show you that there was a robot war 13 years ago or whatever that. That the exposition of doing it, showing you and telling you at the same time is kind of, I think the audience in general is too sophisticated.
But it's a screenwriting 101 mistake.
Yeah. You might have gotten away with that in earlier years of film, but like, and today, like people are just like, oh my god, do something for once.
Although seeing how film came through the silent era, silence, that what actors were doing was all visual, and then the card would come up and say what they said, but you didn't have a lot of space to have a full blah blah blah. They could have only said like a sentence, and so I wonder.
And that's what the dialogue was, though. It was a quick sentence just to map out like
help a train,
or
whatever,
and then they show you a train.
yeah. So I guess I wonder.
And the music can. A lot of it's the physical humor of quick movements and like actual shapes of people being things that your eye can easily like click onto, but also the music is like ramping you up and getting you excited or bringing you down and bringing you down.
Well, the live music was the whole excitement of the viewing event.
But in terms of characters now.
In terms of characters now, they can't just say what they see around them. That's boring. But the other kind of character thing we wanted to talk about is, our story is international, and so we have international characters in it because it was through our vlog on YouTube. It's always been important. Like, we live in China, but we're not trying to tell the story of Chinese people without Chinese people. So we were always kind of looking for ways to incorporate our local friends and local neighbors. And we've done so to varying success. But that the script was going to be very heavily... they live in China, so there will be Chinese people in it. And one concession I have made is that all the Chinese characters who are main characters can speak English. Because 2 reasons, one of them on me and one of them on the potential audience. My Chinese isn't good enough to write a character who only speaks Chinese. And so if a main character only speaks Chinese, then I need a co-writer who is Chinese, and I'm not. That's too bit. Maybe in the future, maybe our second series we can look into that. But for right now, I'm not going to write Chinese dialogue on a large scale. We do have some minor characters who only speak Chinese, and for that, I'll probably still consult with Milan or someone.
Well, getting like culturally correct things is important.
Yeah.
But actually, like if you're going to have a philosophical discussion about something,
I mean, I don't have the language to write that. Yeah. And so I would need a full-on co-writer. And the second consideration is that in the English language market, subtitles are still a pretty big turnoff.
Mm-hmm.
I think people with like Netflix showing more and more international fare, people are getting more used to it, but it still limits your potential audience, and our audience is limited to start with. So we wanted to cast that net super wide, and I understand taking issue with that choice, but that's the choice we're making.
It's funny. It's not funny. Watching a lot of the YouTube teacher guru guys, being that there's so big of an Asian and Middle Eastern in particular, but a lot of different countries are bursting onto YouTube with huge audiences. A lot of these people are calling in, commenting, and asking questions about like, should I do a dual language? And everyone, which they're all English speaking, are like, no. People will turn off faster. Then they say, like, I turn off faster. If I see a dual language anything, I'm kind of like, it's better for you, if it's more work, I don't know if you can manage it, but if you need to be an English language at all, make it 2 different channels completely, because there's no market for anybody to be.
And the English language market across the board is it's big. It's the biggest. And that, like, I remember interviewing European rockers, European pop musicians who chose to sing in English. And the answer is always because that market is the biggest.
Yeah.
And you'll have something like Sigur Rós, who they don't sing in English, but I think that's,
that's a tiny niche audience of people that are listening for more ambient noiseescapes, and that there's a weird audience for that I mean are far more advanced than most people that are just show. I want somebody to fall over and then tell me that like it's because of this reason. Yeah.
So that's the concession we made there, but there's still a lot of fun we can have with that. So we have the English ability of the different Chinese characters is different and idiosyncratic. So like we have one character who she's kind of tightly wound and her English is like always perfect, but also kind of like textbook alien, and part of what that shows about her character is like she's terrified of making a mistake, and that like, so that through that language choice we can like convey that additional thing about her character, versus another character who's like a cool, fun, easygoing guy whose English language is very slang filled, and he somehow has like all the latest internet slang, even more than like our two main American characters do. Or like this character speaks English but it's not that good, and so they can make some funny mistakes. But so that even having the characters speak English, there's still like some interesting choices we can make there, which is a lot of fun too. It's all fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of like who is Chinese and who is a foreigner, that's kind of easy. That was an easy distinction to make based on like what kind of position do they hold in the city and what relative, like if they have an extensive network and community, they're probably Chinese. If they have this kind of job, they'll have to be a Chinese person. If they have this kind of job, they'll be a foreign person. And then within the foreigners, because this is true to our experience, they're not all American. So I kind of made them a bunch of different nationalities. Somewhat arbitrarily, I'll say. And then somewhat based on, this is again taken from our life, the real people that we know. And then, of course, they are all English speakers, because I believe most, if not all, of our English-speaking characters are English teachers. Although one of them's not. Oh, I'm kidding. This is not it. But so that part of it was also really interesting, and making these language choices based on their backgrounds. Is another avenue to like giving them dimension, I would say. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the characters. And I'm so excited for you to meet them. my bad guy in particular is like super fun to write. I think that's what everybody says.
It's funny because they're watching them grow already. Like the whole journey that you just mapped out has been many months of working on characters who are kind of like already have been in the back of our minds of people that we've met and amalgams, like you say.
Yeah.
And once you start scooping them all together, and I think that's how they end up taking on their own life. So like every time that you walk away with a script and you come back to me and you say like, so I've set up this guy over here this way. And I'm like, I know that guy now. Like, he's starting to make sense.
Well, and something that really, really helped, in addition to everything else that really helped, was defining. So you have their personality and their quirks and their motivations and their events that they're living through. Defining their relationships to each other told me a ton about who I want them to be. Like, I had two kind of antagonistic to the main characters. These two, so one nemesis and one antagonist. And then, so they were defined in relationship to the main character, but then when I define them into relationship to each other, they actually don't get along with each other. And that like opened up a whole new avenue of storytelling. So like giving these characters a relationship web is really interesting. Mm-hmm. And that I think is another thing I picked up from watching The Office, because as an ensemble, they all relate to each other in such interesting different ways. And Jim and Pam like each other. Jim hates Dwight, but Pam and Dwight actually get along pretty well over the course of the series. And that's a richer, more realer
certainly by the end
circumstance.
There was like their final goodbyes.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, they might not be leaving each other, but like the goodbye to us as watchers, they were just like, these two are friends. We kind of knew that all along without really thinking about.
Yeah.
The way the characters start to connect in their own way. I mean, I think that's one of the things with writers is that they spend their whole life sort of on the sideline watching other people, and as you start to put those together, that
we're socially maladjusted creeps.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what's happening there.
That's why that person's attracted to that person.
Are you participating in this? No, I'm just watching.
Just over here.
Then go away.
I'm writing a book about you.
Go away. That's weird. But yeah, so that's the characters. It's super fun. And it's a big ambitious thing. I referred to it the other day as my life's work, and I think I wasn't joking.
Well, that's the funny thing. If to make this bigger, to end this off with, like the bigger aspect of us moving to China, like you had the idea that you were going to write. When you got here, and it was, whether it was about China or was about us or whatever it was, you were going to write something.
Yeah.
Because you under the assumption that you're going to be working less and
Yeah.
be able to find yourself as an artist and all those things that we all leave America to go do.
And for a long time, I resisted the idea, even while we were pitching and developing this idea I resisted the idea of writing something that's taken from our life until
it's tough because it sounds so cliche.
It does sound so cliche, but it is also.
It's what you know.
Nobody just makes it up out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
Even like George R.R. Martin. I'm listening to a podcast going over the last season. But even he probably based character types on people he knew or
you have to, yeah.
blew them up to grand saga-like experiences, but he probably knows someone who's bitchy like Cersei.
Yeah, if
or
you take
graspy. You're not gonna invent new human dynamics, and if you do, no one's going to relate to that. No, it's not gonna be interesting. So it's not hacky to take from your own life, because that's what everybody's doing.
Even if you take the biggest, silliest, most fantasy things of Superman, who everyone always says is unrelatable.
Yeah.
Until you unpack the baggage of Simon and Schuster or whatever.
Yeah.
He's the ultimate immigrant, and in a world where you have no power, to have the ultimate power for that, and to be from a planet that's is dead, and you're oh well, all right, maybe I can start to understand what this character is. It wasn't just that he's an alien blob that rules the world or something
Right, he
really
still reacts in very human ways.
Yeah, so you have to be pulling something from your life somewhere to be making something that you relate to. Forget about the audience. Let's find what you relate to first, and what you relate to is the people that are around you,
and even up to. There was a couple months where I kept trying to make it happen that the Emily character was a teacher, but that the series wasn't about that. And then I've been teaching for 8 years. That's what's on my mind. Those are the stories I have. It doesn't make sense not to have it be a school set story. It's not going to be about the students, which maybe that's ultimately what I didn't want it to be about. But it's not a family comedy because they don't have a family. It's not a hangout comedy because I just didn't want it to be hangout comedy. I felt would neuter the idea of them being in China if they were just friends hanging out at the same coffee shop every day.
Right, yeah. You might as well just stay in New York and write friends again.
Yeah,
friends too. The friending.
It had to be a workplace comedy, and so I resisted it for so long. But then because originally your character didn't work at the school because you currently do not work at a school, but it was then all your character did was sit home and wait for the Emily character, which wasn't compelling. So you were what if he worked at the school too? And I was then this is about them working at a school. I don't want it to be that. Oh, but here's how that works. Okay, I guess it's that.
And if you take the other side of the most obvious story of expat, moving to a different country, exotic new world, do you make an entire story that's just your two characters going from UNESCO site to UNESCO site?
The tourism series is not.
Yeah,
that's not a thing.
Yeah,
the tourism sitcom.
I mean, that makes sense why in a YouTube tourism kind of way that's what you know, for production value, I need to afford to go on vacation, so I'll just film what I do when I go from hotel to hostel to restaurant or whatever that. But if you're writing a story, it's not that interesting. I mean, I personally don't find it that interesting to travel around that way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really interest me for us to be telling stories about that. There's the interesting thing is that we actually live in a different culture and have to do different things different ways. That's an exciting way to live than the way that I was brought up to be
and what we wanted to show. I mean, because what's the reason that it's from the point of view of two expats rather than two Chinese people, besides the fact that you and I are expats, but that we think it's interesting, the fish out of water aspect of it is interesting, and to show people tentatively embracing a culture other than their own and seeing how it changes them and how they deal with it and how they resist the change and, you know, everything that comes with that. That's what's interesting to me about that.
Yeah.
And they have to be in some sort of stable situation, and it's not an outright fantasy. They have to have a job, and the job they would have is English teaching.
Yeah.
And then,
that's just the
yeah, so it's
fact.
just like that had to, though, that became fact, and then once it was fact, the story kind of, where I was having trouble with it, loosened up, and like I was like,
well,
it solves so many problems for them to teach at the school together.
So much of the expat story.
And to have the other characters, many of the other characters, related to the school.
So much of the expat story for everybody is how transient it is. You're here for 6 months, or, you know, any country really, but you're here for 6 months, or maybe 3 or 4 years or something like that. And everyone has a story of, like, if you've been someplace for a while, you get friends and then they leave.
Yeah.
And so that story is, I mean, you can, there's tons of people that I've followed over the years, from blogs and vlogs, that, like, you're getting into their story, and then they're like, all right, so I'm leaving. You're, what happened? No, it's just I finished my year and I'm done, and I got another country I want to move to, or I'm ready to move back home, or starting a relationship, or I want to start a family here, or I want to do this there.
Yeah.
Like, the idea of, that's a good story, and that's what a lot of people are putting out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in our story is different in that, like, I don't see a lot of stories of people that have moved away for a long period of time, and how does that everyday life actually become something that's the normal?
Yeah.
Our normal life is odd that we can still laugh at it 8 years of, like, well, that's not how I do that, but I guess here's what we're doing. Like,
we can't freeze it because Chinese kids don't eat frozen things.
Yeah, it's choices that we have to make about ourselves and our assumptions that we thought was right. We have to alter ourselves to do it, and that's tons of fodder for writing of stories that I haven't read before.
As a greater thesis, society is weird, man.
Yeah.
Even like, and when you grow up inside of a society and never leave that society, I don't think you see how weird some of the things we've thought of as humanity are.
Sure.
And so by placing these two characters outside of a different society that they have not grown up on, I hope to show that perspective of, like, some of the things we choose to do to each other is just weird.
Well, I think with the places that you've been before we moved here, and the places that I've been, we've been to different places of the world, but never quite so different. We had to move someplace that was comfortable enough that, you know, we weren't, you know, camping every day.
Yeah.
But
only some days.
Only some days. But that was different enough where we're like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And to embrace that in a way of, like,
and to start from scratch of, like, culture detective, like, what is going on here?
Yeah. To think of yourself for, like, years at a time of, like, I'm just kind of a baby here. I don't really know what's... First, I really can't communicate.
I can't read.
I'm pointing at everything.
Yeah.
Like,
I noticed, like, babies point a lot.
Yeah.
There's when they figure out what this is, then they're like, oh.
Whoa.
You're into pointing.
That kind of base communication that we have to do, and that we still do years later, is, like you're saying, like, you can pick up a paper like any other normal neighbor that we have next to us and be like, I think we're talking about this. Yeah. But you're much more able to be like, oh, look, there's a sale on squids at the grocery store.
Right, yeah. Well, and to back to your point of, like, we didn't want this to be an adventure show where each week our characters were in new places. I'm writing this script with an eye towards the blue sky dream budget. We fundraise $1 million. But even that was like, that's too unrealistic. We're not going to have the money to go to a different 6 different locations. This does have to be on a set, even.
Well, and also when you think about, like, what those other, it was funny because, like, we have a few videos where we go out to the countryside, or for the year that we lived in Lijiang, and of course that's what people want to see because those are the exotic places. Take me out to the Chinese countryside. Like it's beautiful and we love being out there, but we don't live there. We don't have a yak farm or anything like that. Right. It's a place, and it's
if you do, let us know. We want to hear about it.
I want to watch that video.
Yeah.
But and that's so close to us. I mean, we could go from our apartment every day out into the field and film traditional rural life of Chinese farmers.
Yeah.
We're that close to it. But that's
not our story.
That's not our story. And also, at what point we did that once?
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to go out there once a week and be like? And then today we sat around with these other women who were eating seeds, and then
I guess we're making a documentary about women eating seeds.
I guess that's because that's what's happening out there. Like, I have no interest in, and you know, it's like we made that one video that we're super proud of, and you know, someday we'll return to that neighborhood and see if it's even still there.
Yeah.
But you know, somebody watches that on the dreaded Reddit, and they're like, "Oh, this is another ADV channel of they're just going to go out there and like."
My response is they don't own outside.
Right. That's their thing, is they're going around from outside area to outside area.
These are other YouTubers.
Yeah, and
China YouTubers.
And that's fine. We're not going from village to village to show you how people live. Like,
yeah. Because I think on the flip side from that, we're showing these fish out of water. I think by setting it in the city and presenting the city as a normal place, I hope to kind of flip. They are the fish out of water, but the water is normal. Or you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
The metaphor's kind of breaking down, but that it's them that are the weirdos.
Right.
I hope that's what comes out of it. Because I don't want to be racist.
What we have watched from the beginning of us being here is the emergence of a new modern mall. That has turned from that people shop mostly online or at a cheapo market next to their restaurant that they're eating that night, and they're going like, oh, I don't want to buy any of this cheap crap. And now we see them all at H&M. Like, we've watched that over the years of being here, and that's an interesting story to us, to have seen a city go from burp to whoop. Like, that's what we live in, and so that's what the story for us to tell.
Yeah.
And we can make up a fictitious... we can't make up a story about, like, what if the two of us went and lived on a farm. I don't want to live on a farm.
Yeah.
That's
the immediately you pitch that, and the thing that I would see is the small town dynamics between the people. The social dynamics are what would be interesting there, and then, well, why not just put it in the city? That's what I'm more comfortable with.
Well, the beauty too of where we
because I would watch that show. But at present we're not going to write it.
The great thing about where we live too is that you have a decent sized city with the farm outside, so that is part of.
That can be an
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Like that is, we have farmers that we shop with that have come in to the city that
we have farmers that we buy from.
Yeah, that actually, like, one of our funniest things of like one of our first days was being in a modern grocery store and having a farmer couple in front of us can't figure out how to get into a line. And like we're just kind of like watching, and we don't know how to even help. But like the cashier person is just like, no, go around. What are you doing? What
and we're like, they're as clueless as we are.
Yeah, that's great. We're all fresh off the farm.
We don't feel so alone.
Yeah, but we live in an area where that's enough of a story for us.
Yeah.
We're not getting on motorcycles and climbing mountains.
Well, yeah, we don't want to do the fish out of water.
Fish flopping around on the side of a rock.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about little squows?
Oh yeah, sure.
So close the book on homeschool film school. Here's some commentary. So the one new video we put up this week was little squows. I keep saying little squows. Peter and I had a discussion over whether to apostrophize Lil. Because I was like, oh, you forgot apostrophe here. And Peter's like, no modern day rap singer. It tends to be rappers who are Lil. None of them do that.
And the same thing.
But grammatically, and he's like, grammatically nothing. If we didn't have an apostrophe.
It's not going to show up in the algorithm.
Yeah, it's not going to show up. But I was like, all right, I'm a slave to the algorithm.
And the same thing with the Big Daddy Squeezins.
Oh yeah, I tried to put an apostrophe for the missing G. And that's not how that would go.
We lose points if we put in the apostrophe.
But yeah, I think I have been referring to him as Little Squoze. Little Squoze. But so this is a kind of an idea that even since we first got here, Peter and I have been joking around that because we like to watch babies hanging out on the streets doing their business and make up the dialogue that they're saying.
Babies here.
Yeah, there's so many babies, and I think
funny.
China's still in the well. Here's my supposition, and maybe someone knows definitively. I'm sure someone knows definitively. But so it's quite common to live, if you're a married woman, with your in-laws and have your kids and 2 generations, 3 generations under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you have a nice apartment, maybe it's very crowded. And so I think Chinese people spend more time in the cities anyway, maybe the countryside, out in public. Rather than at home, because home's not that comfortable and it's really crowded, and you want to get away from your mother-in-law. But so
Grandpa wants to take his birds out to the park.
Yeah, people.
Why are you taking birds for a walk?
Yeah,
Got to get out of the house, I imagine.
And the people, and this is cities in general, but I think maybe even more so, people live life out in public. So that just babies are hanging out outside all the time. So we see a lot of babies. So we would make up little dialogues for what they're saying. And then maybe 7 years ago, we were like, if we filmed this and started putting it on YouTube, this might be more popular than anything we've ever done. So we'll see. Now we have started filming it and putting it on YouTube. But our supposition, that one's stuck on that word today, our thesis is that babies... This is no baby geniuses style. What if babies were super smart and said smart things? Our thought is that babies are ridiculously angry and aggressive.
Megalomaniacal.
Yeah, and
they don't know who we are. They just we're minions.
And I think psychologically to some degree, babies are a little psychopaths. They don't have a conception of other people's self, and all that is apparent to them is their own needs. No judgment, babies, but that's that's how.
Own it up, babies.
You
are.
Their brain is wired to serve their needs at the expense of everyone around them, because they just don't have a conception that other people also exist as people. So that's
the premise for this bit.
That's a very academic view of the fact that we sit around going, open the goddamn door now! And make each other laugh.
Mom, you're stupid.
Mom, I'm gonna hit you!
Because you can see the baby's going to hit Mom.
Yeah.
You can see it a mile away.
It's hilarious. And we think that's hilarious. That's our sense of humor. And so that's what we're starting to do with Little Squoze.
Yeah, he's the beginning of it.
Yeah. And how did... We were just fooling around with the squeezins and this past tense being squoze.
We do that all the time. We're coming up with names for them, so it's putting that to certain characters is, again, we're building different characters.
Yeah, and a lot. Some of this is
shorts, and when we're trying to figure out what kind of to spend less time on our YouTube stuff and just make them short experiments of let's try to put together
just
something.
20 seconds?
Yeah, something like that. And how do we develop little characters, little skits, little exercises for, sound and music and visual things of it's just that's an easy go-to of we'll just make these angry little babies. So, but you got to do something with it to make it exciting. And so wherever we pull names, characters, or whatever
Well, we're following the Pete Holmes maxim of the difference between professionally funny people and just regular funny people is that the professionals write it down. So it is all this stuff comes to us at all times, and we put it in a notebook, or we just hang on to it rather than letting it pass in the moment. And then we actually, instead of saying wouldn't it be funny if we recorded this, we record it now. Because we did spend 6 years going, wouldn't it be funny if we did this? Now we're finally doing it.
Yeah, that's one of when you're just getting it down, no matter how stupid it is, like, and then you start to forget, like, where did it even come from? Like, I don't know, it's in this notebook. What did I say?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but it's fun. It's making me laugh now, so. And then getting it down, for me, anyways, I feel like getting stuff down as fast as possible, because if I have to think about it tomorrow, then I'm going to be like, that was so dumb. But if I do it now, then it's over.
Thing is, especially with lightweight comedy, the more time you have to think about it, the more time you have to think it's not a good idea or it's not worth doing.
Yeah, it seems like a waste of time. Like, why am I going to put time aside to do this? Whereas, like, if I just did it now, then it's over. And I think that's what I'm attracted to with using YouTube as a sketchbook of like, just do it, like, and put it out. Like, what does it matter? It's not our database it's filling up. It's free to us, so just put it out and I'll get a laugh at it, or we'll never look at it again. At least, you know, you learn something. I mean, you know, that in particular was putting it together in one day. Like, got an idea. Okay, let's record the voices. I'll find the footage. I got an idea of what to do. I'll put together all the editing for that. I need an ending to it. I'll write a song to it. And like, wow, I did that in one day. That's fantastic. I'm awesome. Woohoo! Next one. Forget about it.
Yeah. And then you said you wrote the song because the video was so short, but you actually kind of liked the music so much that you're like, why don't I write a whole 2-minute track to this? So.
Right. Yeah, not that not much happens to it, but like as a 2-minute song for like a rave up.
You could put it on, do some jazzercise.
And I mean, that's another aspect of what we're doing of sound and music. Same thing as like writing and visual and animation, all that stuff is like the sketchbook itself is much bigger than just writing things down in a notebook. We're experimenting any way that we can tell a story.
Right, well the bandwidth is there, so let's use it.
Yeah, to go all the way back around. When it comes to, we start putting this down on film and hiring people, all this is fodder for, get it down in the notebook, because we might be able to use that later.
Yeah.
And the notebook might literally be a notebook.
Yeah.
Or it might be YouTube or SoundCloud or...
Lil Squoze already might be in the miniseries and might make a guest appearance.
We love Lil Squoze and Big Daddy Squeezins.
Big Daddy Squeezins. Who is me.
Yeah.
I kept wanting to say that we gender flipped it because I played the grandpa and you played the baby, but the baby was a boy.
Yeah.
But I just naturally was thinking that a baby would be a girl. But...
Well, I like that difference of you playing a lower voice and me playing a higher voice, because...
Yeah, I guess that's... We register flipped is what we did.
Right, for a comedy purposes, that makes it a little bit more outside of our realms.
Yeah.
I know from, like, trying to do voices that if I'm trying to do my right voice, if it's not me, then, I mean, I'm not an actor, so I'm not going to... It'd be a Liam Neeson or something like that. Like, it's a lot harder for me to make, like, you know... a Mel Blanc do a voice.
Yeah.
Funny voices are always easier, at least for me.
I think so. Well, and you realize, I mean, when you think about voice acting, there are people who are complete chameleons with their voice. Like John DiMaggio, who plays Bender.
Oh, yeah.
He's very versatile. But then someone like Skinner, Principal Skinner.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah.
But
Harry Shearer.
Harry Shearer. All of his characters kind of sound like Harry Shearer. And actually, when you hear him speak in person, he sounds like Principal Skinner. Yeah. But someone like...
or like, what's his name? Bob's Burgers. What's his name?
Oh, John Benjamin. John Benjamin only sounds like John Benjamin. And to his credit, he knows that's what he's doing.
And we all love him for it.
And
put a different face on his comic book character.
Well, that was that episode of Archer where they had the Bob's characters. It was really great. There's something very soothing about John Benjamin's voice. Especially when he's irritating. It's just like, it's... Which I think I always sound like me, but I can do funny voices. This is another thing I realized about voices. I told you this already, but I'll tell you this. Since I've made a conscious effort in the past couple of years to listen to more, watch and consume more women featuring media, and it's harder than you would think. Mm-hmm. But like podcasts specifically, I sought out podcasts hosted by women. So I've been hearing a lot more female voices besides my own, in a good way, in a positive way. And I realized, because I've always sounded like this. I've always had this high squeaky voice. Someone once told me when I was a teenager that my voice was dripping with money because I could play children in voiceover ads, which I never pursued, but I always have held on to that. But because I have a small, high voice. And that felt weird to me until I started hearing how many other grown women have higher register voices like mine. Like, my voice isn't weird. Women have all kinds of voices, but we literally don't hear them.
Yeah.
As often as we hear male voices.
I mean, I imagine that's something that in mainstream movies, you expect a certain height of a person, mm-hmm. a certain voice, a certain color hair, and that's only now that is in all different forms.
Yeah.
It's something that you can, cartoon voices are a good example, because that's unfortunately where a lot of women were put, you got a funny voice, you got to be a comic book character.
Yeah.
You're going to be a cartoon
You're
character.
going to be Bart Simpson.
Right. Whereas now, a lot of the stuff that we watch have different women that are not all the same women.
Well, that's what made me think of it, because Yardley Smith, I feel like, Yardley Smith, I think is maybe how her voice is pronounced. That I always identified with her, because I also have that Lisa Simpson voice. Mm-hmm. But we're not weirdos, is the thing.
Well, and
I've just that I had to go seek out all these women's voices to find out that I'm not weird. Was interesting. It was affirming.
Well, like we were watching with
not weird.
That episode of Take My Wife.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Both talking about do we have the same voice?
Yeah.
I guess if you put two women in a room, they're talking to each other, or are they just a monologue, do they have the same dialogue that they're doing? Of course you can hear the difference between next to each other, but if you heard two men, it has to be pretty drastic. You'd have to be listening to Jack Nicholson and Jeff Goldblum to go I'm listening to that conversation.
Right.
Two regular guys.
Yeah.
But you don't put two regular guys on TV. It's just there's more guys with more voices than there is more women with more voices.
In terms of guys' voices, there's so many podcasts that we listen to that I'm they all sound the same.
Yeah.
Which also might be a Nerdist influenced, we prefer this register, we prefer this cadence.
Well,
a lot of them work with each other, so maybe they're picking up the same slang.
Yeah, and generational and
yeah.
But that whole thing with, I want to say late 90s, early 2000s with I would say one of the emergences of the small girl voice that was all of a sudden ushered into Volkswagen commercials and stuff
I'm a little girl, and don't you want to buy a car too? I needed health insurance also.
That somehow, and people reacted to that early on. I remember a normal society that was ugh, why I hate these, up to the point of our last election of I can't stand this screeching Hillary.
That there is very gendered male voices. Or lower voices are more masculine, so the preference for low voices, but then when women do that, they get vocal fry, and so we hate that. And so there's so much about voices that is also politicized.
Yeah.
Which...
And so it's not necessarily new, but right from the beginning, when it was hipsters have money now.
Yeah.
So let's cater coffee commercials and Volkswagens to them.
Yeah.
So let's have...
And hipsters are effeminate and don't respect authority.
Right.
So we can have a non-authoritative high voice.
And I don't think at that point it was still young enough where your average American could be looking at that and going like, I'm not gonna buy one of those girly cars.
Yeah.
And now where they're just like, fuck that bitch, I'm never gonna vote for any woman. Like,
yeah.
It's escalated to a point of like a desperateness.
Well, I mean, that's not necessarily where I was going with this, but I mean, that's the pervasiveness of misogyny, is that it is like, I hate women so much that I can't even stand to listen to one, and that can be presented as a rational reaction rather than it is just hatred and lack of openness to things that are different from you.
Yeah. And so we're a little bit biased because you have a voice like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's fair for anyone to be like, my voice sounds different, so I don't get a voice in anything.
Right. Well, and but just like the kind of pleasure and relief at it dawning on me after, because I was listening to a story on To the Best of Our Knowledge, which is a podcast radio show by Wisconsin Public Radio. Very interesting to a person like me. And they had, the umpteenth story reported by a woman who had a voice like mine, and the point of the story wasn't her voice, but it was just I like hearing that and realizing that it's normal.
Well, like even speaking of what's her name, who does Lisa Simpson?
Yardley Smith.
Yeah. Apparently, from listening to Harmontown, she does a podcast on true crime stuff, which is like,
oh yeah.
Like, I mean, that's great. Like, she seems to be, because of The Simpsons, like a pioneer that has taken that voice to more mainstream. Like, I mean, I can't imagine like in the 90s or 80s listening to a crime podcast, if podcasts exist, with her voice on it would have been tolerated at all.
Well, and she does have the two detectives. They interview actual detectives, and the two detectives are like Scotch swilling, cigar smoking.
Oh yeah.
That's what she said. Yeah, I didn't actually listen to her podcast because I'm not
interested in the crime drama stuff.
Yeah, I'm not a true crime fan. I like fake crimes.
Yeah. I've seen too much true crime in my life.
But yeah, that all voices can tell all kinds of stories. It's a great world that this is opening up. Maybe not the mainstream is not necessarily opening up, but after years of seeking out podcasts and media of people like me, I don't feel so weird anymore.
Interesting people like me. I going to just about end this because we've been on for a while. The idea of more as saturated with mainstream stuff that this YouTube could be, that the ability to have that kind of distribution throughout the world and be able to afford things like we don't have to put stuff on analog tape means that there are a bigger variety of voices that are out there that's exciting.
Yeah,
and that's kind of why we why are you moving to China and decided to make a movie? Like, no one else is going to pay for it, so we'll figure out how to do it, and we'll do whatever we want. Whether it works or not, that's the journey of getting there is pretty fun.
Yeah. I wasn't listening to you. I was thinking about women I listened to. But you want to say noodles off? Noodles to you.